Adam Reisteck is a New York-based composer, producer, and entrepreneur. Whether writing for small ensembles, producing electronic music, or performing improvised group compositions on Wi-Fi-connected laptops, Reifsteck creates dynamic, futuristic sound worlds and brings new audiences to classical music. Recipient of grants from the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, the Irving S. Gilmore Foundation, and the Kalamazoo MI Community Foundation, his music has been performed by orchestra and ensembles of international reputation. Adam is also the founder of Technophonic Recordings, a label with over 350 releases, many of which have charted in the Beatport Top 100. And he is a music business coach. His Music Producers Alliance online community and professional development platform provides learning resources, networking, and monitoring to emerging producers and composers. And here he is, Adam Reisteck.
Well, nice to have you in my talk.
Yeah, nice to finally meet you. So.
Yeah, we had some trouble with time zones last time.
Yeah, it's always tricky whenever we do the daylight savings time stuff here in the US.
Yeah, you do it quite early. We start with it next Sunday. So
yeah.
Well, all right. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. So super excited to have a chat and learn more about what you do as well, and share what I know too. So
yeah, I've really been looking forward to surely interesting interview. Let's jump into it. You do a lot of different things. You are a business coach, or music business coach. You are a producer. You are the owner, I think, of a studio, even of a label at least, and you are a composer, classical composer, and composer of modern music. So, what are you doing most of your time?
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey. I've been at this probably, I guess. I guess I'm backing up a little bit. I guess I've been doing music for a very long time. I guess I started playing piano at the age of 5, and then kind of developed my musicianship skills through that. And then I went to university for an undergraduate degree in music technology. So my parents, when I was 16 years old, bought me my first synthesizer, a Roland XP80 station. And so they bought me that, and I was doing a whole bunch of sequencing and programming and stuff like that. I was kind of really into Mannheim steamrollers, the Chip Davis, kind of the synthesizer kind of stuff, but the Christmas music kind of got me into producing electronic music. And so then when I came time to when I graduated high school, it was like, the next step is to go to university. So then I applied to, I was looking at a bunch of different schools, but the one that really caught my attention was Duquesne University, which is in Pittsburgh. And they had probably one of the first in the United States to actually offer a degree in music technology. So I applied and got in there. And what was super interesting about Duquesne was the philosophy that their education philosophy was to teach you on both sides of the recording window, so to speak. So the control room to being in the studio. So both as an engineer and producer and composer, having that musicianship really informs you as a person that's on the other side of the control room window, making the decisions about the record and doing the recording and everything. So it was kind of like a best of both worlds, really kind of fine tuning my musicianship and composing skills, and then the technology and stuff behind that. And then like most most people that of my particular age group, I guess, when I graduated college in 2005, and that was kind of when, I guess, when the music industry kind of started to really shift and change. So with the advent, of iTunes and, and then the ability to be an independent producer and artist and get your stuff out there on the iTunes and different platforms like that, and kind of this new evolution kicked off with the music industry, and lots of issues that came up in that. But at any rate, it was fascinating, because as a, not to knock my education that I had, was that they don't really prepare you for, because usually the way in our country, the way university is set up, it doesn't really prepare you as a vocational school, an alternative school where you do have an apprenticeship, and then the natural thing is evolution is like, if you have an apprenticeship, then you go and then you learn how to develop the skills that you can take, and then start, making a living from that. So I didn't really have that experience. So like most people that had graduated around that time, was we said, okay, but what happens next? And I guess as a musician, the only trajectory that kind of made sense in terms of actually maybe making a living as a musician, and as opposed to gigging and freelancing, because at the time I was kind of really nervous about taking that route of freelancing and not having like a steady source of income. So the natural progression is like, teaching at a university eventually, right? So that would be kind of the next step. So how you get jobs at university is you have to have a doctorate degree. So I started that journey of starting with the master's, and then I had finished my master's, and then decided in composition, and decided that I did not want to go into academia. So it just wasn't for me. So like most musicians, I guess, in the United States, we have the dream of either going to Los Angeles or New York. So, and I chose New York.
Yeah.
So I packed up and
slightly more expensive.
Yeah. So I packed up and moved to New York, and quickly realized that I needed to find a day job, because I was not getting enough of freelancing work to actually pay the crazy rent, like even with roommates, so it's really tough to make it work if you don't have like a sustainable income source. So yeah, I mean, I guess then I spent probably the next 10 years, working a day job, and then kind of doing music on the side. So was always kind of my side hustle. I was composing chamber music for small ensembles. Yeah, and I've gotten commissions and to write for small ensembles and that sort of thing, and it it was great, but it certainly wasn't enough to pay the bills and do it something like full time. So so then I kind of got back to my roots in the sense of electronic music. I started, since I was kind of not making the progress that I wanted in the classical music scene, because the classical music scene is really interesting, especially here in New York, is that I felt like unless you're writing a certain style, the opportunities just aren't there, because you kind of there's like a certain like John Zorn, or kind of the bang on the can, kind of that post-minimalist, Philip Glass even, unless you're writing that type of music, you're not going to be getting the commissions. And that was not the type of music I was writing. I was kind of the type of music I was writing was a little bit more neo-romantic, with influences of 12-tone from Schoenberg, but breaking the rules and putting it in a tonal, more like Alvin Berg, I guess, in that sense. Where he, Berg sort of took the 12-tone model and put it into, tonal context. So I was kind of doing that, and that really didn't really fit into what the new music scene is here in New York. So then I was like, okay, so I'm gonna maybe try going back into my roots of electronic music, and started going to underground, the underground club scene here in New York, and really getting into electronic dance music. And then I started producing my own electronic dance music through. And then I was like, okay, so how do I get that music out to people? And
Right.
the natural step was to, become a DJ.
Oh, yeah.
So I was hanging out at a club in the Lower East Side, and I was talking to the promoter that was there at the event, and like I was saying, how do you book DJs for this and for these events and stuff, and I had never DJed before, and he said, "Oh, are you a DJ?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, so kind of, told a white lie there, saying yes, I was a DJ. And he's like, "Oh, okay. So why do you want to, do a slot or something? We'll try you out." And I said, "Sure," because you don't, I learned really quickly here in New York, you don't say no to any opportunities. So
It's not only in New York.
yeah. So then you say, I said yes, and so I went home and I figured out how to try to how to DJ a little bit with Ableton Live, and try to figure that out, and then so I had that first gig, and it was a 2-hour set, and the first hour was great, but then the second hour came, and then I kind of crashed and burned. So that was like the end of my DJing career before it even started. So then I was like, okay, so I was talking with some of my friends that were DJ producers, and they were saying, having a hard time getting signed to labels, because the only way you could get your music on Beatport, which is a marketplace similar to iTunes was, or where you can download music, and Beatport is really big in the DJ community in terms of getting those lossless WAV files, downloading them for sets and stuff. So if you're a producer, an electronic music producer, and you want people to be playing your music in clubs, you have to get your stuff on the platforms where DJs are buying music for their sets, and one of the biggest platforms is Beatport. And so I was talking with some of my producer friends here in New York, and they were struggling to get, and if you wanted your music on Beatport, the only way to get there is to have be on a label, because they only worked with labels. So I was like, so they were, my friends were having a hard time trying to get signed to labels. So I said, because their music was a little bit less mainstream, a little bit more underground. And so I said, well, since I'm not really good at playing this stuff live, so why don't I kind of take a backseat, a behind the scenes approach, and why don't I start a label? Can't be that hard, right? So naive me, you started a record label, and that's kind of where Technophonic in 2015. That's where Technophonic Recordings was born, and we had our first release in May of 2015, and then from there I just grew that that label, and then sort of turned it into an artist services kind of company where we were developing artists and helping them with their marketing and branding and that sort of thing beyond just releasing music. So right before the pandemic, I was at 100 artists on my roster, so it was pretty amazing ride, and then of course then the pandemic happened, and life changed as we know it. So I made kind of, as most people do, I guess, or most people did when that all happened, is in the lockdown we kind of started to reevaluate what we wanted, I guess, out of life. So then I kind of, realized like my journey was really, really difficult in trying to make a go at the music, beyond just kind of like a side hustle or a hobby. And that journey took me, almost 15 years to actually make it work. So I said, why don't we start, this is, a lot of producers are struggling with this idea of like, how do you actually monetize your production skills? Because we all know streaming services don't pay very well. So how do you kind of really build a real business out of your production skills? So, and so I kind of, through lots of trial and error and lots of wasted money and blood, sweat and tears, I kind of figured out what worked for me, coming up in this new world where, the industry completely did a 180 after, it's been kind of trying to, reinvent itself over the past decade, but yeah, so kind of stepping out and kind of figuring that out. So that's where the Music Producers Alliance was born, and I got a couple friends of mine, colleagues that have been kind of around, that have been around as long as I have, and wanting to help up and coming producers sort of navigate this new world that we live in. So that's where the Music Producers Alliance was born, and I kind of took off the producer hat, I guess, so to speak, and made the transition into a business coach or a mentor for music producers that are looking for help to build a business from their music.
Does this mean that let's say your main activities, at least at the moment, are indeed business coach?
Yes. Yeah.
See.
So I do want, once this new venture, I guess in a way I'm an entrepreneur in that sense. Like I started, one venture that was profitable, the Technophonic recordings, and then now I'm moving on to the next project. But as an entrepreneur too, if I was smarter, I guess, or maybe more savvier, I would found a way to keep Technophonic recordings going rather than doing the shift. But I think one of the things that that I think is about a career in music is that it's fascinating. It takes you in all different directions, and that's kind of the exciting thing about it too. It's never boring, it's not just one thing. So yeah, so I guess, yeah.
Great.
Eventually, yeah, that's a long-winded explanation to say I'll get back to my own music and that kind of the creative aspect, but for now, yeah, it's like all business. So
fascinating story.
Yeah.
Fascinating story. Thank you. So just to get you right, you are not composing, you're not producing your own music at the moment at all.
Right. Yeah. Since the pandemic. Yeah. I guess my last performance of my work was in December 2019. So that was right before, everything. Yeah. So yeah. So things are now starting to come back with live performances here in New York. And so I think, I'm definitely have the itch to get back into getting some of my own music out there. But that's kind of on the roadmap, so to speak, for this year. So.
Just one question concerning making music.
Yeah.
Was it really helpful to have a classical education, or perhaps not at all?
I think, yeah, because I get that question a lot. Because like, do I need to know theory, music theory, and this kind of stuff? And honestly, I mean, for me, it just makes things a hell of a lot easier. Just because I don't have to like, like I know instinctually, like, because I've had that training, I know instinctually how music is kind of put together, so I don't really have to think about it. So I think in that sense, that is super helpful. But so I guess it's kind of a complicated question, because I think, you don't necessarily need to know, like for me, you don't need to know like the stuff I know as far as advanced harmonies and music theory and stuff to actually, make good sounding music. But I think having kind of like a base knowledge of how things are put together, and because it's like a language, I guess, and music is very much a language, and I can kind of speak Spanish, but I'm not fluent in it, so I know enough to get by. But I would do a lot better if with communication in that language if I spoke it fluently, I guess. So I guess it's kind of like the same concept. You would once you're fluent in it, it becomes easier to communicate. So
recently I had an interview with a musician from Switzerland, and she had the following theory. She said, at first you learn music, you study music or learn it anyway, and the music you are producing at this first stage is very boring. And then you try to get better, and you make over intellectual music. It's not boring at all, but nobody wants to listen to him.
Right.
And then the third stage is you forget about it all and make great music. What do you think about it?
Oh, that's so true. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it's that you totally forget about it. It's that it becomes second nature, that it's kind of so ingrained with you that now you kind of, I guess another way to word it is like, once you know the rules, then you can learn how to break them. So
Beethoven.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Okay. All right. iConcerts. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, so that was a very fun project. That what I had this idea of like, so my music, my classical music or contemporary classical music is very programmatic. So a lot of people have told me I should be a film composer, but I didn't want to go down that road. But because that's a whole different whole different side of the industry, and very kind of complicated. You have to have that sort of mindset for that. So, but anyway, a lot of my music is programmatic. So like people say, like you hear, it invokes certain imagery and certain scenery and stuff like that. So, so I guess what I wanted to do is, and people were really responding to my music whenever it's performed, but I wanted to find a way to connect with the audience on a different level than just having, the musicians play my music and then people just listen passively. So I kind of artistically, I wanted to find a way to, how do I involve the audience? Because I guess when I was in high school, I used to be heavily involved in musical theater, and part of that is breaking down the fourth wall, and you know, one of the ways you can break down the fourth wall is and invite the audience and engage the audience to participate in the production. So I was like, there's got to be a way to do this with music. So how do you, besides just, you know, having like a drum circle or something like that, you know? And then how do I, then that was the first part. And then the second part is, well, because we're kind of in this technological age, you know, with these things, you know, like how do I, you know, involve that in some capacity, the technology aspect. And so then I've been kind of pretty inspired about with chance music. I've always been kind of fascinated with that, of like giving artists, or giving, you know, musicians like just roadmaps or fragments of things, and then they can interpret that and build an improvisatory approach to music. And so basically I was doing some research and stuff on like what was the technology that I needed to kind of make this happen, or what, you know, how could I make this happen? And I came across this this group here in New York. Or they're no longer they're no longer a group right now, but at the time when I came up with this idea, they were a very active ensemble here in New York, and they're called Blind Ear, and the leader of the group is a composer, and he came up with a software that he built through Max MSP, and it allowed him to send. So the concept behind Blind Ear was, so Jakob, the founder of Blind Ear, Jakob Czapinski, who's a composer and he kind of, he's also an electronic musician as well. And in electronic music, you deal a lot with loops. So he came up with the idea of, you know, how do we kind of, instead of writing a fully notated piece, when you're performing or doing real-time music creation through Ableton Live, for example, you have these in the set view, you have all these cells with the loops and everything like that. So he said, well, how do I do that with notation? So you have kind of like a loop with just notation. So he came up with wrote a program with Max MSP that allowed you to send music notation to the performers through Wi-Fi connected laptops. So like you'd have one software was the master, and then you have the other computers that are the slave to that, and so the composer sitting at the control, the main computer, has the ability to send out these notations in real time out to the performers, who can immediately, they have to be really good sight readers, I guess, but they can immediately play it back. So that was like kind of like a match made in heaven for me at that point, because I was like, great, I don't have to figure out how to do this, it's already been done. But the vision that I had is like, well, okay, so how do we involve the audience in the composition process, right? So I took that a step further, and we did like audience polling. So I would ask, like through a projector, I would project questions, and then a poll in real time, asking the audience to input into the creation process, and the audience could vote on, what the tempo, how fast it should go, should the musicians play louder or play softer. So it's like kind of,
I see.
yeah. So it's like audience part of being, get it a way to get the people, and they vote on their iPhone, kind of like American Idol, or like, voting for your favorite contestant on some reality show. So it's kind of the same idea, but then we would make a piece out of what the audience wanted to hear. So yeah, it was really, and that's kind of why I called it iConcert.
I see. So to understand it, you set the borders of, let's say, a kind of probability field, and in between these borders that the audience can choose.
Yep.
I see. I was automatically reminded on something, perhaps even similar, not the same, definitely.
Yeah.
Frank Zappa did. I've forgotten the name of the piece. He performed it live, and he gave the rhythm, a certain rhythm, and the musicians could do what they want as long as they hold the rhythm.
Yep.
And they could even dance without making any sound. It's of course not the same, but let's say the basic idea is kind of similar.
Yeah. So it was a really great project, and I got a grant from the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council to realize this project, and so it was really cool. We did a couple performances of it in New York, and then we just kind of just moved on to the next project at that point. But yeah, that was a really great project.
Where did you get the audience from?
The audience was from the neighborhood. That was kind of part of the grant. We it was a kind of the concept with why it was such a good fit for the foundation, or the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, was that they wanted to support projects that engage the community, and this was a community. I mean, you can't engage the community with art than this. So I picked the neighborhood I actually was living in at the time. I moved further down in Manhattan now, but I was living in Upper Manhattan, so in a neighborhood called Inwood. And so we did the performance at a church community center up there in Inwood, and just kind of invited people in and to participate into this live event. So so it was really kind of really fun.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
It was a lot of work to pull out, but and certainly not a sustainable project long term. Doing it a couple
at least
times.
Economically not. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But yeah, it's super rewarding artistically and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, perhaps as a part of a marketing action or something like that.
Yeah.
In the marketing mix.
Yeah.